from a barbarian army sacking the Eternal City for the first time in 800 years, to an emperor's body left to rot on a battlefield and never found, to a teenage emperor whose crown a barbarian yanked off his head and didn't even bother to kill him for. This is how the Roman Empire fell. And here's what breaks people. Rome wasn't conquered. The most powerful empire in history slowly killed itself.
So, the greatest empire ever died of natural causes, sir?
Worse, self-inflicted ones. And it starts the first time Rome nearly died, in the year 235. That year, a Roman emperor named Severus Alexander was murdered by his own soldiers. Honestly, that was just another Tuesday in Rome. But this time it kicked off 50 straight years of chaos so bad, historians just call it the crisis of the 3rd century. In 50 years, Rome burned through at least 26 emperors, most of them generals proclaimed by their own troops, then murdered by the next general within months. Rome was fighting barbarians on the Rhine, Persians in the east, a plague tearing through the cities, and the money was collapsing. Emperors kept shrinking the silver in their coins until a Roman coin was basically a painted slug.
They inflated their way to the bottom, sir. Some things never change.
It got so bad the empire split apart into 3 separate empires. A breakaway Gallic empire in the west, a Palmyrene empire in the east, and a shrinking Rome in the middle. And then 2 soldier emperors dragged it back from the dead. Aurelian reconquered all 3 pieces in 5 years, and Diocletian rebuilt the whole thing. Rome survived, but Diocletian's fix planted the seed that would eventually kill it. Diocletian looked at an empire too big for one man to defend and split it. One emperor for the west, one for the east. Smart short-term, catastrophic long-term. Because a few decades later, Constantine built a dazzling new capital in the east, Constantinople. And from that day, the money, the trade, and the talent drained east. The eastern half got rich. The western half, the half with Rome in it, got poor and got the longer, angrier border to defend. By 395, an emperor named Theodosius died and split the empire between his 2 sons for good. There would never again be one Rome, just a rich east and a broke, exposed west holding the bag.
They spun off the part that owed all the money, sir.
And the west had stopped filling its own army with Romans. It was hiring barbarians instead. Whole tribes armed and trained by Rome to defend Rome. That worked right up until it spectacularly didn't. In the 370s, a terrifying new people came riding out of the east, the Huns. So brutal they sent entire nations running. One of them, the Goths, showed up at Rome's border begging to be let in, away from the Huns. The Eastern Emperor Valens let them in. Then his officials cheated them, starved them, and reportedly sold their children into slavery for dog meat. So the Goths revolted. On August 9th, 378, Valens cornered them near a city called Adrianople and made a fatal mistake. He attacked without waiting for reinforcements. Sure, he outnumbered them. He didn't. The Gothic cavalry crashed into his flank, and the most powerful army on earth was annihilated. 2/3 of it, as many as 40,000 men, slaughtered in an afternoon. And Valens was last seen wounded in a farmhouse the Goths burned to the ground. His body was never found.
An emperor of Rome, sir. And we don't even know where he's buried.
Adrianople shattered the one thing that had held for centuries, the myth that Rome's army couldn't lose. The barbarians had just learned the empire could be beaten, and they never forgot it. For a while, the West held on, mostly thanks to one man, a brilliant half-barbarian general named Stilicho, who kept beating back invasions. So naturally, the Roman court got paranoid and executed him in 408, the dumbest possible move at the worst possible time. Because waiting just outside the door was a Gothic king named Alaric, and with Stilicho gone, nobody could stop him. Alaric marched on Rome and put it under siege. And on August 24th, 410, the gates opened. And for the first time in nearly 800 years, a foreign army poured into the city of Rome and sacked it.
800 years, sir. The last guy to do that was wearing animal skins.
The sack itself was almost restrained. 3 days, churches spared, most people left alive. But the damage was psychological. Rome, the eternal city, the city that had taken everyone else, had been taken. One Roman writer said, "The city which had captured the whole world was itself captured." Rome wasn't even the capital anymore, but it was the soul of the empire, and the soul had just been broken into. And then the people who started the whole stampede finally showed up in person. The Huns, led by a man whose name became a synonym for terror, Attila. By the 450s, he'd carved a path of destruction across Europe and turned west. In 451, he poured into Gaul, and the only thing standing in his way was the last great Roman general, Aetius, who pulled off the impossible. He allied Rome with its old enemies, the Goths, met Attila at the Catalaunian Plains, and stopped him. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the ancient world, and the last time a Roman army won a battle that truly mattered.
Rome's big final win, sir, and it had to borrow the Goths to get it.
Attila wasn't done. The next year he invaded Italy itself, flattened whole cities, and marched on Rome. Until the Pope, Leo I, rode out to meet him and somehow talked him into turning around. A year later, Attila died, reportedly of a nosebleed on his own wedding night, and the Hunnic Empire fell apart. And how did Rome reward the general who saved it? The Emperor Valentinian got jealous and personally stabbed Aetius to death at court. A Roman senator reportedly told the emperor he had just cut off his own right hand with his left. 2 years later, the bill came due. A Germanic people called the Vandals, who'd already taken Roman North Africa, sailed across the Mediterranean, landed near Rome, and this time there was no Stilicho, no Aetius, nobody left to stop them. Again, the Pope rode out and won a promise of no massacre. But for 2 full weeks in the summer of 455, the Vandals stripped Rome of everything that wasn't nailed down, and plenty that was. Gold, statues, even the gilded roof tiles off the Temple of Jupiter. They trashed the place so thoroughly that 1400 years later, we named a word after them: vandalism.
They looted so hard they got a vocabulary word, sir.
After that, the Western Roman Empire was a corpse that hadn't been told yet. The emperors were powerless puppets, installed and removed by whichever barbarian general controlled the army. Which brings us to the quietest ending to the biggest empire in history. By 475, the man actually running Italy put his own teenage son on the throne. The boy's name was, almost too perfectly, Romulus, the same name as the legendary founder of Rome 1,000 years earlier, nicknamed Augustulus, the Little Augustus. The last Roman emperor in the West shared his name with both the first king of Rome and the first emperor of Rome at once. You couldn't write it. Then, on September 4th, 476, a Germanic commander named Odoacer, whose soldiers wanted land the boy's father refused them, marched in and took over. He killed the father. But the teenage emperor? Odoacer decided he wasn't even worth killing, gave him a pension, and sent him to a country estate.
The Roman Empire didn't end with a bang, sir. It ended with a severance package.
Odoacer didn't even crown himself. He packed up the imperial robes and crown, shipped them to the emperor in the east, and sent the message that the West didn't need an emperor anymore. And just like that, no final battle, no last stand, the Western Roman Empire, after 500 years, simply stopped existing. But here's what nobody tells you. Rome didn't actually die in 476, because that eastern half, the rich one, with Constantinople, never fell. It kept calling itself the Roman Empire, kept Roman law and Roman titles, and lived on for almost another 1,000 years, until 1453. The people we now call the Byzantines never once called themselves that. To them, they were Romans, to the very end. So the fall of Rome wasn't a death. It was the collapse of the western half, and the survival, in the east, of the longest-lived empire in human history. So that's how Rome fell, not to one enemy, but to 50 years of civil war, a split that bled the West dry, an army it handed to outsiders, a catastrophe at Adrianople, 3 sacks of the Eternal City, and finally a teenage emperor quietly pensioned off by a barbarian who didn't think the throne was worth taking. The empire that conquered the world was undone by its own size, its own money, and its own armies. But if you want to see Rome at the absolute peak of its power, when its emperors were doing things so ruthless and audacious the whole world had to watch, check out every Roman emperor's most savage power move right here. It's a much better day for the Caesars than this.